right, class. Mr. Watlington, how you doing? Are you doing? Welcome to CYB 495. Today we are having class out here on the campus of California Baptist University. We are in front of the James Building. This James Building, it was named after Dr. Whitley E. James, and it's a great looking facility, isn't it? I wish I was here. I've never been to this facility in my life, but I think that's what it looks like. But anyway, this is where we're going to virtually have class today. Welcome again to CYB 495. This is your capstone. Wow, this brings a lot of pieces together. a lot of good information in this class, and I'm sure you all are going to have a great time. It's going to be a little challenging, but trust me, no worries. You're all going to make it through it great. So let's get into this. This is our overview, and I'm going to do my week 1 lecture at the same time. So when we look at the overview for this course, what does it do? What does it provide? It provides the opportunity to, like I say, integrate a lot of knowledge and demonstrate a lot of the skills that you've obtained over the course of your academic career here at CBU. Also, it really focuses on risk. Really, this class, they call it capstone, but really it is all about risk management and how to manage risk in your organization with respect to cybersecurity posturing, and a lot of the exercises, the discussions and recommendations that you do. It's really going to be heavily focused in risk management. Now, at the end, you got a final paper, a final report. It's a risk assessment report, really, what you're going to provide, as well as a risk assessment brief. And this is very, very real world. As a matter of fact, it's ironically, I just finished doing a risk assessment on some of our cybersecurity boundaries where I work, and I use some of these exact same philosophies and techniques that we're going to cover in the next 8 weeks. So it's a great class, and it is something that you can actually use when you get in industry. The book, like I say, it's under that access area, instant access in your course. It's the the Security Risk Assessment Handbook by Daniel Landau. If you have any problems getting to that material, please let me know. So let's look at the agenda. What are we going to be doing over the next 8 weeks? Like I say, within this class, from a course perspective, there's discussion posts. Like I say, always, every week, be sure we knock out the discussion post. The first one is an introduction post. Introduce yourself to your classmates. I recognize a lot of your names. I've had you guys, I think every one of you in a class before, so I have a feeling you probably already know each other. Now, one of the things that we will do in this class, and I've set up a schedule, but it's a weekly 30-minute session with me to discuss the critical assignment. This is just a way for us to, and this is individual, so it's not a group session, individual session that you set up to do that. Now, each weekly assignments, like I say, we're going to focus on some specific component of the risk assessment each week. Thread discussions, like I said, initial post, and then you're going to respond to your classmates the same way you've done throughout your entire career here. So this is nothing new. Now, one thing you will do is maybe a little bit different. Like I say, it's just called this Career Exploration Conference and Report. This is where you're going to meet with your CBU Career Center to look at what type of cybersecurity careers are available out there. And this is really important, guys, because depending on what you want to do with the rest of your cybersecurity life, you may go in different paths. You may want to stay in auditing. You may want to be an assessor, or excuse me, forensics. I mean, there's just so many different ways you can go. Ethical hacking, pen testing. A lot of ways you can go with that. Now, the critical assignment, that's the last thing we're doing, right? So that's going to be your final report as well as a presentation. So the capstone, it culminates with the report and your presentation. From a weekly perspective, like I said, week 1, we're looking at just talking about some risk assessment basics. But I will tell you, everything we do in week 1 lays a fundamental foundation for the rest of the weeks. You're going to see the same thing that I'm going to talk about here when I get into my week 1 lecture, repeated over and over and over again each week as we go through this. Week 2, we're going to look at project definition and preparations. Project prep. This is going to help you get started with your project. Week 3, we're going to talk about data gathering. How do you collect data with respect to doing your risk analysis, your risk assessment? Different types of data. Week 3, we're going to look at administrative controls, safeguards in the data. Week 4, we're going to talk about technical data controls and how we gather. And week 5 is really going to get into physical data gathering. So when you think about from a security perspective, you have administrative processes, technical processes, physical control processes. Now, most of us, we want to hit the field, and all we focus on is the techie side. But guys, believe it or not, if you look at a typical control set, like the NIST 853, only of the probably 900 controls that are in there, less than a third of them are actually technical controls. Yeah, a large portion of those controls are administrative. They're physical in nature. So, just jump right into the techie stuff is great, but it doesn't always do everything we need to do with respect to reducing and mitigating risk. And speaking of that, week 6, we're going to get into risk mitigation and assessment reporting, how to report. Week 7, talk some about project management and different assessment approaches, different approaches we can use to assess risk within an organization. Week 8, that's your Capstone project. Okay, so I hope that makes sense, kind of give you a layout of what we're doing week by week. And now, let's switch gears. Let's talk about our week 1. Let's get into a lecture. This is something I'm going to walk through now. You're going to see this really every week because this is the basis of risk, this risk definition. When we think about, I'm telling you, everything that we do, especially in cybersecurity, it links back to this risk. Risk. That's the only reason we're really there, is to help mitigate and reduce risk. So when we think about risk, I feel like I'm a first grade teacher. Okay, everybody together. Risk is the likelihood of a threat agent taking advantage of a vulnerability and the corresponding business impacts. And everybody says, thank you, Mr. Watlington. Yeah, but that is the definition of risk. The likelihood of a threat agent taking advantage of a vulnerability and the corresponding business impacts. So really, and if I want to kind of boil that down even further, a vulnerability is encountered by a threat and there's an impact. Now, let's look at this in your everyday life, because this is no different. Just because we're talking cybersecurity, we think, oh my God, that's all this techie stuff. No. Your home today, you do the exact same thing. In your neighborhood, in your community, you have threats and you have threat agents. There are people who are probably walking around looking in your neighborhood, looking at your house or your apartment, your car, those kind of things. We call casing the joint. They're trying to figure out how, one, what's the best house to break into? Okay? Yeah, that's what they're doing, because what they're looking for, vulnerabilities. Every house in your neighborhood has vulnerabilities of some type. No matter where you live, you have some type of vulnerability. So a threat agent, that threat agent, someone who wants to do something nefarious, they're looking, okay, who has the least vulnerabilities? So I can get into their house and get out. Then we have to look at what's going to be the impact. And that's how you base, one, how you protect your house, how you mitigate those risks by reducing the vulnerabilities, by shrinking the attack surface so that that threat agent isn't as susceptible to stop at your house. Why? Because, here again, it's not conducive, because you've got lights, you got a pit bull, you got everything that you need to kind of try to protect your house. Now, from a cybersecurity perspective, what do? We monitor and assess risk on our information systems based on 3 factors. And I'm sure you've heard these 3 things over and over and over again, and you've probably gotten sick of them, but I'm telling you, everything that we do ties back to confidentiality, integrity, and availability. These 3 factors, this is what guides and governs really everything we do. So again, this risk definition, you're going to see this slide over and over and over again. So lock this bad boy in. Likelihood of a threat agent taking advantage of a vulnerability and the corresponding business impacts. So let's decompose this a little bit farther. Okay, we're going to take it down another notch. So we have a threat source, and like I said, that could be with respect to cybersecurity, it could be an insider threat. It could be, phishing attacks, all of these different things. And that threat source has some type of characteristics. It has intent. It presents some type of capability base. So that threat source, has things, those characteristics that now it makes it a viable threat. So that threat source will then initiate some type of threat event. Meaning that, okay, I'm an insider threat. So at some point, I'm going to initiate a threat event. I'm going to try to do privilege escalation or something of that nature. Now, one of the things the key word to all of this, though, is likelihood. With respect to this risk model, likelihood is where the money is made or lost. Okay? You say, what do I mean by that? All right. Think about this. If I told you this morning, I went to work and I left the window in my house wide open. Is that a vulnerability? Yes. Are there threats who would love to probably go through my window because I left it open? Yes. So far, it sounds pretty bad, doesn't it? What if I told you I live in an apartment on the 10th floor? See, now I've reduced the likelihood tremendously. So now what would at first appear to be a vulnerability that, was terrible, now it's not so bad, because now if I say, you know what, I'll call my wife, hey, did you lock the door? You lock the window? No, I thought you did it before you left. If we lived on the first floor, if we were a single family home, one of us would probably leave work and come back and mitigate that risk by locking the door. If we lived on the 10th floor of an apartment building and it's an outside facing window, it'll be okay. I don't think Spider-Man is going to scale this building just to get into our 10th floor apartment. So likelihood really is the key to all this. So now, let's say the likelihood is there. So now this threat event is going to have some type of sequence of action. Something's going to happen. We have that threat source has capabilities. Now something's going to happen. It's going to come up to your door, shake the knob, shake the door, peep in the window. That's the sequence of action. Then it's going to take a screwdriver out of the pocket and break into the door. The same with an insider threat. So now they have a sequence of action. I have exploited your password, username and password, and I know that you're a privileged user. So now I can start to privilege escalate and work my way up into your system using, the advanced persistent threat model. So now that this has happened, now this threat event is going to exploit a vulnerability. The vulnerability, like I say, is weak passwords, poor password hygiene. You don't have your user accounts, privileged user accounts, locked the way they should be and monitored. Now you have vulnerabilities that's going to be exploited by this threat event with a sequence of actions because there's a high likelihood. So when we look at these, there we go. My handy dandy remote stopped on me. Again, back to likelihood. Now we have to look at what is the likelihood of success. We have the likelihood of initiation, meaning the likelihood that they're going to take advantage of it. Now, what's the likelihood that they're going to be successful? Well, that's going to depend on many factors, right? It's going to depend on how well we have done our cyber hygiene on the network. Have we locked down accounts the way that we should? So even though they may have gotten passwords, now when I audit, I see some nefarious activity because this individual is logging in at 7 o'clock in the morning. And one thing I know for sure, there is not a system administrator in the world who's going to be at work at 7 o'clock in the morning. These are night people, okay? So they're still recovering from playing Call of Duty all night. So now that's going to be a key indicator. Wait a minute, I need to be sure that I'm monitoring the account usages. So now I can reduce the likelihood of success, or I have the right technical controls, the right tools in place, so that even if they try to escalate privileges, now through technical means, I am able to reduce the likelihood of their success. So let's say they are able to get in, that vulnerability, there's going to be some level of severity. So even if they do get in, how severe is it? Let's say if they're just a local, if the account that they took over was just for local administrative rights. Well, that kind of scopes it pretty small, right? Now they can get into a couple of machines. But let's say if they were a domain administrator, now they have free reign of the entire network because they probably have access to root, or the super user account if you're a Windows guy. So now the severity is even worse. So, hope you see where I'm going. So what does this do now? It causes some type of adverse impact. And that adverse impact is going to produce organizational risk. So you see that risk model that we just talked about, likelihood of a threat agent taking advantage of a vulnerability, corresponding business impacts. You see now when we boil this down, when we decompose it, there's people. This is where the likelihoods come into play, as well as threat agents, threat events, adverse impact. I'm telling you guys, this is 80% of the rest of the class. Understand it, because now at each of these junctures, throughout the class, we're going to look at now how to start mitigating and how to start assessing what these are, okay? So when we think about a risk assessment, it comes with components. And a lot of this, where I'm pulling this from is really from the NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology, the 800-30, which is risk assessment. So you start with any risk assessment, you want to know what the threat sources are. What are those threats? It could be adversarial threats. It could be environmental threats. It could be structural threats. Adversarial mean could be, priv user, insider threats, organizational competitors, things of that nature. Also, it could be priv users on your account. Structural. It could be based on your environmental, power, water, electrical, your networking, your data centers. Environmental, this is always one you always have to be aware of as well. Natural, man-made type threats, hurricanes, storms, natural events, infrastructure failure, whatever it may be. Or, now we're in an environment where people are attacking our infrastructure. So you always want to be able to start categorizing what your threat sources are. That's our table 1. Now, table 2, this is where we start coming up with some type of assessment scale. This is really the likelihood. This is the likelihood piece. So when we talk about this, now we're looking at two methods, either qualitative or quantitative, okay? Quantitative is numerical. I can count it. There are 15 people in the room. Quantitative, boom. Qualitative is how well was your visit to the doctor? And what do? They give you a little scale, usually 1 to 5, or smiley faces to a frown face. That's qualitative because you can't put a direct, actually that's more semi qualitative, but qualitative would be, was it very good? I hear high, medium, low, those. Now, when I take a numerical scale and add to this now I start making it semi-qualitative because I'm putting some type of quantitative values on a qualitative source. So now if I rate something 0 to 4, very low, and I can rate that a 0. From 5 to 20, low, that would be a 2. So now this gives me a way to do, now I can do math. Now I can actually start comparing things mathematically because I've taken, like I say, a qualitative value and I've made a semi-qualitative value from that. So that's our table 2. We look at table 3 over here, right? Table 3, now again, is part of our assessment scale that we impact the threat event. Is that event very high? Is it high? Is it medium, low? It looks very much like our threat, the likelihood. So now this is saying if this event happens, how bad is it going to be? This right here is just the likelihood. What's the likelihood of the event happening? Here, now we're looking at when the event happens, what is the impact? What happens? We're going to lose our network for X amount of time. This isn't going to work. So, and then we get to table 4, which again is our level of risk. And then what this does, this brings together, culminates the likelihood and the impact. So what it says, kind of two ways this goes. So I have likelihood, which is this way, and then level of impact is across. So if I say likelihood is high, level of impact is low, then what does that give me? That will give me a low level of risk. But let's say likelihood is high and level of impact is high. What is that going to give me? That will be a high, where they meet. It's just go that way and come down that way. Gives you a high level of impact. So I've got different tables that I work. Now when I finish, I can now have my risk assessment results. And really this last one pretty much tells me everything that I need to know about this event. Let's say I look at my threat event, which comes from table 1, right? Tornadoes, the vulnerabilities, structural damage. What mitigating factors? I have a coop site, a hot site or a cold site or warm site stood up. What security controls is it based on? The PE, the physical and environmental family. Then the rest of this comes from the other tables, table 2, 3, and 4. The likelihood is moderate, the impact is moderate, and my risk assessment is moderate. Same thing now if I look at a technical control, insider threat, what's the likelihood? Or the vulnerability, loss of intellectual property, the mitigating factors, least privileges. I want to be sure I keep everybody out of my network that don't need to be there, or don't give them the right amount of privileges so they can do the work they need. That's part of my access control security family group that it falls under. And same thing, if I look at table 2, 3, and 4, if I rate the likelihood low, but the impact is high. Here again, now I may rate that as a high because even though it's low, if someone gets in, it's going to do some grave damage. So that gives you an idea. Really, this is the basis of what you're going to, of your entire risk assessment, based on what these components and these tables. So if you assess risk, what's the next thing you want to be able to do with it? You want to know how to mitigate it, right? How do I mitigate risk? Well, 4 ways. Four ways we do that. We can avoid it. What does that mean? Eliminate the cause. Okay, if you don't want the risk of somebody hitting your car, Okay, being in a, if you don't want the risk of being in a car accident, what can you do? Sell your car. You avoid it altogether. But what do we typically do with a car? We do what? The second one. We transfer that risk. How do we transfer risk? We buy insurance. So basically, I give USAA or State Farm, Allstate, Geico, whoever, here's my money. I want you to own the risk. So if I have a wreck, here, you fix it for me after I pay my $500 deductible. But yeah, so we transfer the risk. Another way is what? Accept the risk. Meaning, I just had a fender bender. Somebody just backed into my bumper and just, kind of cupped the back of my bumper. Oh my God, do I really want to go to the insurance? I don't want to sell my car, so I'm not going to avoid it. Do I want to transfer it? Do I want to call the insurance company to do a claim that's probably going to make my insurance go up over a $400 damage? So no, and you look at it and go, it's just a scratch on the side. You know what? I'm good. I'm good. I'm going to accept it. Acknowledge the risk is there, and you just accept the consequences. And then the last one is mitigate. Mitigation. This is really what we do most of the time in security. And the whole purpose of it is that we try to mitigate risk down to its lowest level. So how do we mitigate risk with your car? Well, one, I'm going to park, on the back 40s of the Walmart parking lot to reduce the likelihood again, of someone backing into my car. That's one way I can mitigate that risk. I can, put bumper guards around my, all the different things to do to bring that risk down. So really, I can say that's what we do a lot in the world of cybersecurity, is work with our key stakeholders to identify risk. That's for the purpose of risk assessment, and then learn to mitigate it. How do we mitigate risk? We do it with security controls and different countermeasures. How do security controls work? Well, a couple things. Like I said, we always have vulnerabilities. Let's take any information system. It has vulnerabilities, whether it's network vulnerabilities, physical, environmental vulnerabilities, unintentional threats, whatever it may be. These are all vulnerabilities. And over here, what do we always have? You've got those threats, right? We come up threat agents, threat events. So, and these could be, external attack, vandalism, untrained users. And many times, when we talk about insider threat, there's really two types of insider threats that we talk about. Is a malicious insider threat and an inadvertent insider threat. Inadvertent, what do you mean by that? Good question. I'm glad you asked that. That's when people who are on your network may be untrained. So by them doing something that they have, totally inadvertent, it isn't malicious, but still they can cause grave danger in your information system by doing something incorrect, by incorrectly using that information system. So, like I said, we got threats, we have vulnerabilities. Threats are always trying to do what? Yeah, boom, attack vulnerabilities. And what do? We put controls in place. These controls is what we use to mitigate risk. In this case, I can have technical controls. I may update my routing switching equipment. Physical controls, I can put so little plastic covers on keyboards, things like that to protect it. Antivirus, those types of things, so we can try to reduce risk. Now, what is inevitable here? We will never cover 100% of our risk. No matter how many controls I put in place, something still may go through. So meaning that I'm not going to always be able to stop everything that goes into my door. So what do we do with that? What do we call that? That's what we call residual risk, meaning that we've implemented controls to try to keep our threat event agents from getting to our critical information, but we know that we can't protect 100%. You can't do it in your home. You can't do it at work. So there's always residual risk. What do you do with that residual risk? I can say this word, I can. Residual risk when it happens. Well, you can accept it and say, yes, I know it's there, but it's been mitigated to a level that's acceptable. I can accept that level of risk. Or the second leg of that, that's where we would do some type of cost-benefit analysis to see, do we need to try to mitigate this risk even farther? Do I need to now buy different equipment? Do I need to implement some other compensatory controls, that we put in place to mitigate risk even farther? So you see, this is how we assess risk, we identify it, mitigate it, and then actually also look at what residual risk we have left over and make a plan of action. Many times we put these on what we call a POAM, a plan of action and milestones that we track how we want to handle that residual risk. So when we've done all these things, now you're going to wrap it up into what? Some type of risk assessment report that you give to an information owner. And hopefully it is decision quality. Not just a bunch of information, not just a bunch of data, but decision quality report that the information owner, that your business owner can make an informed decision about before they go spend more money. this is what it always comes down to is show me the money. Show me the money, Jerry. Because at the end of the day, just like we do in our homes, we want to pay the least as we can to get the most protection for our assets. Businesses want to do the same thing. So that's what this risk assessment report, you include all the vulnerabilities, the threat sources, everything that you have, and we typically document that into a system security plan to say this is how we're going to secure our system. Who's responsible? If you think about it from a RASCI perspective, responsible, who's responsible, who's accountable, who's supporting, who's consulting, who's informed. The information owner is always responsible. Now, we as cybersecurity, many times we're held accountable, or our IT department. But the responsibility comes down to the information owner. Why? Because they're the one who has the paycheck. Actually, so good habit to get into that you review this risk assessment at least annually as a minimum, or if there's some major change to your information system. I say at least annually, but because now in the environment we're in, things are changing constantly. So this is just a document you want to write and put on the shelf, a year later or whenever the next inspection, the next audit comes, you take it off, blow it off. And no, this is something you want to do with periodicity, that you're looking at the risk in your organization. Okay. All right. So like I said, we looked at week one overview, week one lecture that we talked about many things with respect to risk management, the risk formula. Don't forget that risk formula, because you're going to see it over and over and over and over again. The likelihood of a threat agent exploiting a vulnerability and the corresponding business impacts. All right, guys, have a great week one. Looking forward to a great class.